Good evening and welcome to Allegiant Church and Creative Ministries for our Wednesday night Bible study. Welcome to everyone in the house and everyone that's online. We wish you were here with us. We have some great snacks tonight for Rosh Hashanah that we begin celebrating tonight as we enter into the new Jewish year and also begin the Festival of Trumpets and into Yom Kippur coming up in just about 10 days. So we hope that this is a great year for all of you, or as the Israelis like to say, a sweet new year. So we hope that that's true for all of you. All right, we're going to get into what in heaven are you voting for tonight. This is something we started last week. And again, tonight the plan is, as I mentioned on Sunday, is to talk about some of the, I've been looking for the right word here. Now on my slide you're going to see lies. Some of them you may think, well, they're not really lies, or maybe they're misspeaks or whatever. Some of them are flat out lies, but I'll let you be the judge of that. But whatever you want to call them, misspeaking or errors or whatever, we're going to talk about some of those in this campaign and see what your thoughts are on that. But before we do, Linda H., would you please say a prayer for us?
Yes. God, we thank you so much as we take time out of our busy days and we can just come and just bask in your presence and Father, just meet you right here at this place in this church. And Lord, we just love you so much. And oh God, as we stand and just look at everything going on in our country, God, it's comforting to know that you are our hope and our strength and our peace today. We can hold on to you. We can cry out to you and pray to you for help. God, we just thank you for being so good in our families this week in this church. And just being an awesome God. And Lord, we know that there are people hurting in our state and all over the country from the hurricane. And God, we are just humbled as we see people, Jesus in people, as people are serving those people that's been devastated. And God, it's just a warm feeling to see that happening all over our country, and how people have come out to give supplies, to give their service and their time. Lord, it's just awesome to see that, and we're just thankful for all the responders and everyone that's chipping in. And we thank you for the leadership, God, that's working hard to get things straightened out and to get those people help. And we just pray continually for them that you will meet all of their needs. Everything they need, God, we pray that you will be right there with it and give them peace. And during this time, Lord, of their desperation, we pray that they will just somehow see you in the middle of this, and that will change their lives, God. That is what it's about. And God, we thank you again for everything you've done in our church family and the praise reports, and we see you moving, God. We do see you moving, and we are thankful for that. God, we thank you for our class and our teacher. Lord, tonight we pray that you will open our eyes and our minds and our hearts to be alert about what's going on, God, as we study your word, God, and we know, God, that everything is going to be okay, that you have the whole world in your hands. And for that, we love you, we're thankful, and we bow, and we just give you honor in this place. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, so I'm not going to go through all the scriptures that we went through last week, but let's do remember as we consider our vote and consider what God's going to do in our country. And of course, we're praying for our country because the Bible tells us to pray for the land that He's placed us in, right? And in that case, it was Israel and Babylon. But for us, sometimes it feels like Babylon around here. We need to be praying for our city too. And it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. In all your ways acknowledge Him. Do you think one of your ways is how you vote? Okay, so we need to honor Him as we vote, right? As best we can. Can we do that perfectly with anybody? No, but we can do as best we can, right? And He shall direct your paths. All right, and then the other scriptures are there. Last week, Linda B. had asked me to put up the scriptures online as a video, so that's up there for you guys now if you would like to see that or like to listen to it. If you want to hear my crazy voice reading them out, then it's on there for you. Okay. I am trying to remember where my glasses are. Would somebody mind grabbing my ones off my piano or pulpit? I don't think they're in my office because I don't think there's anything. You can look, but I think everything's still out of there. Susan, if she can't find them, would you mind running and getting my other ones? Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry about that online. I just realized when I tried to read my screen that I wasn't doing a very good job of it. So maybe if I get it far enough away. That's okay. She's grabbing mine. Thank you. Okay. One of them is. We'll get it there in a minute. All right. So I didn't get this quite as polished as I wanted to. I had some videos and things picked out, and I may try to play some of those, but I couldn't get them clipped and stuff in time. There's just too much data to go through, and so I'm not quite as where I'd like to be. But considering that we're getting pressing on this date, and we need to get through some things, we're going to move forward with it. Did anybody see the debate last night? Okay. Any impressions?
I think it was one of the more civilized ones we've seen in quite some time.
It's been a while. I told Susan this morning. I said, well, that's what debates used to be like.
That's right.
It really was very civilized or very civil, and absolutely. Anybody else?
I didn't see it. I had a guy at work who was typically very pro one party.
Mm-hmm.
He said that they both did really well and asked, I have those two guys want to run for president.
They did both. I thought both of them did well last night. I know there's been the pundits always have their things to say, but in reality, both of them did a good job. There's no doubt, and I think CNN and MSNBC even was right on this point that J.D. Vance is a far superior debater. He's just very good at it. However, Walls did not make very many mistakes. He handled himself fairly well. There was one moment where he misspoke, which was the funny moment of the night, and he just misspoke. It wasn't. I'm not criticizing him for it, but it was funny. Where he said that he had become friends with the school shooters. He meant the school victims of the school shooters, but he said the school. So that was kind of funny, especially when somebody posted up online a picture of him with several of the school shooters, which was very badly photoshopped and obvious that it was a fake. But so that was kind of the worst flaw of the night was that he did not answer the question about when he was in China or Hong Kong. Because he had said that he was in Hong Kong when Tiananmen Square massacre occurred in China, and there's actually newspaper articles showing that he didn't go till August, and that was in May and June. So people were asking him about that because he has, I don't know if you've noticed, but on the trail, his combat experience, all that stuff, he has a tendency just to kind of create a narrative that's not accurate. I'm just going to put it that way. Some people would call it that other word that I mentioned a few minutes ago, but he does. He says things and he kind of embellishes his stories. It's like a Klingon. Have anybody watched Star Trek? Klingons like to embellish their war stories, and he has a tendency to do that. Nobody else in this campaign does that. So, just kidding. But anyway, so that was his worst moment because he did not ever answer the question. Instead, he just he called himself a knucklehead. But he didn't answer the question. Yeah, he didn't really address it. So I did think it was interesting, and some of you may have noticed that CBS said they were not going to fact check. They did fact check J.D. Vance twice. So J.D. Vance decided to jump in there and fact check their fact check and explain to them why he responded the way he did, which MSNBC today accused him of mansplaining for that. So just so you know, which I thought was, wow, really? That's ridiculous. If you can't, I'm sorry. Should I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. Women, forgive me here. But if you want to be treated equally, you can't cry foul when somebody treats you just like they would a man.
That's right.
So you can't play it both ways. Either be the old-fashioned lady with the corset and what they used to call that, the parasol, parasol, yeah, parasol, the corset and the parasol, and be the helpless girl. You can do that, or you can be the hey, I'm as tough as nails and whatever. And either one of those is fine, whatever you want to be. But you can't play both sides. All right, you gotta be fair. And so that was a little bit ridiculous, but that's not unusual for these things. Now, on J.D. Vance's side, what a lot of conservatives would have liked to have seen from him is a heavier hand when it came to particularly the abortion issue. And we probably won't have time to get into that tonight because we've got so much other stuff, but if y'all want to, we'll talk about that at some point. I think it's on the line on the board here. And he really didn't go after some of the things he could have went after. But I think Steve Dace, who is a Christian news, although he works for the Blaze, so it's a secular radio, but he made a comment after the debate that I think was right on fire. He said it was not J.D. Vance's job to win the conservatives last night. He needed to show the other part of the country that he was not weird, which is what they keep calling him. And in that respect, he did an excellent job of showing that he was very mature, very capable, and very smart. And all of those things he did very well. So I would have liked to have heard him say some things. I would have liked to have heard him pick up on a few things that he didn't, but he didn't have to persuade me. So, I'm just telling you the truth. That's just the way it is. So that's the way it is. All right. So we're going to start off with Donald Trump because we all know he's a liar because the news media tells us that every single day, right? So we might as well start with him. So let's, now what I tried to do here, and this may seem unbalanced because the types of lies are different between the two candidates. But honestly, I did my best to find the people on the other side to tell me what the lies were so that I could have a balanced view of this and not come at it, try to be objective as I possibly could. So it's going to seem a little weird because the lies seem different, but I did try. And this is what it is, so forgive me if I'm not up to whatever you expect. Here we go. So one lie, supposedly, that he said is that Trump claimed that everybody, including, now this was during the debate, by the way, everybody, including every legal scholar, wanted Roe versus Wade overturned. Okay? And truly, June 2022, the Gallup poll showed that 58% did not want Roe overturned and 35% did. So in that regard, it is not everybody that wanted Roe versus Wade overturned. Now, you take it, well, let me just see. What's y'all's thought on that lie?
Well, everybody he talked to.
Everybody he talked to, all right? Maybe. All right, any other thoughts?
Well, they didn't poll everybody. They poll only a certain percentage. And a lot of times what we find with the media is they poll areas that they know go one way or the other. So,
Well, that's true, but even if the people in the poll disagreed, then that wasn't everybody, right?
right.
Because they're holding him to that standard of
Oh, I know.
everybody. So that means 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100, 1,000 out of 1,000, which to me is a pretty hard standard.
Yeah.
You could argue it either way. Either Donald Trump needs to quit saying stuff like that, or the media needs to quit taking everything literally,
Only one side, isn't it?
right? Now, he did say every legal scholar. Now, this is interesting, and I don't have time to get into it tonight. I've got more information on this if you want it. But the majority of progressive lawyers, progressive legal scholars, y'all know what a progressive is? Progressives is in the vein of Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We're talking about the liberals, okay? The progressives of the early 1900s leading up to now. Hillary Clinton called herself a progressive, and certainly Kamala Harris is a progressive. Okay? Most of the progressive legal scholars believed that Roe versus Wade was bad law, that it would be hard to argue in support of because of the way it was done. I'm not saying they're not pro-abortion. They were.
Yeah, they were.
They were very pro-abortion, but they believed the law itself shouldn't have been done. But, well, for one, because notice what I'm doing. I'm calling it a law, and that's what you hear the campaigners do. The courts don't make laws. Only the legislature makes the law. That's clear in the Constitution. And that was the mistake that the Roe court made, is that it decided that it would take the legislature's job and take it over. What it could have done was said, you know what? They have a right to whatever, and they could have named whatever that right they believed was in the Constitution, and then say, and it's up to the legislature to enshrine that in some kind of code. They could have done that. But they literally went so far as to break it down and say in the first trimester and in the second trimester and in the third. That's legislation. That is not judicial. See that? And that's why he was right, I believe, on maybe not every legal. Okay, maybe if we're going by everybody, that's tough. But the majority of progressives, according to the polls, according to the other people, they agreed that Roe was bad law. They liked the results of it, but they didn't like the law or the way it was implemented. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of a gray area there. As far as everybody, that's what Trump does. Hating for it, whatever, but if you know how you get around somebody and you just know that's just them? Mm-hmm. Have you ever said, oh, that's just them? I know you have. You can go shake your head. I know you have, right? Y'all probably say that about Pastor, don't you? That's just him. We do that because we know that people have these little quirks, these little tics or whatever. And one of Donald Trump's quirks and tics is everything is the biggest it's ever been. Everything is the greatest it's ever been. The crowds are larger than they've ever been. Everybody believes this way. Everybody supports me. That's his thing, right? If you didn't catch it, he showed up in Georgia this week with truckloads of stuff to give for the relief, okay, for the hurricane relief. What did he say? This is probably the biggest storm ever in history. See, it's not just him that's the biggest, it's everything he's a part of that's the biggest. That's who he is. You can hate him for that, you can call him a liar for that if you want. I'm just telling you, that's probably not going to change. He's what, 80 years old now? It's probably not going to change. So that's a part of this. Absolutely. All right. He said babies are being aborted after birth. And he was attacked for that because they said that's not true. Okay? And again, I said this is not going to sound balanced, and this is why. Because what they're accusing him of is not fair in this case. Now, there are a few that I'm going to show you that, yeah, he's just lying. Okay? But in this case, their response was that infanticide is illegal everywhere in the U.S. But here's the truth. In May of 2023, Tim Walz, the current vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, signed a bill that removed a previous requirement to preserve the life and health of infants who were born alive after an attempted abortion. So in other words, doctors no longer had to keep that baby alive if it was born alive. Okay? Call that, maybe it's not aborted after birth. However, this is going to blow your mind. Let me move on. It also removed a requirement to report any abortions that were over 19 weeks so that we couldn't track the older abortions or the older infants. From 2015 to 2022, there were 24 infants that were born alive after attempted abortions in Minnesota that we know of. In 4 states, Arizona, Florida, Minnesota, and Texas, between 20 and 21, 35 children were reported born alive after an abortion attempt. Okay? In Florida, in 2022, 8 babies were born alive after attempted abortions. all of them that I just read off, died one way or the other. So you tell me if they're aborting live babies. Call it neglect, call it medical assistance, call it whatever you want to, but that sounds like they're being aborted after birth.
Yes.
Okay, now, how far do I want to go here? Just a second. I thought I had that in my, it may not have copied over yet. Okay, but I have an article that was actually written. I wanted to at least give you the title on it. I'm not seeing it. It may not have copied over yet to me. But it's an actual paper in the Journal of Medical Ethics. And it advocates for aborting babies even up to a few days after they're born, while the doctors and the parents decide whether or not they have the money for it or whether it's going to convenience their life or whatever. Because and the argument basically goes that if there's no ethical reason to believe that it's a person before it's born, then there's no ethical reason to believe it is when it's still an infant and dependent upon its mother. So when you start framing this in the terms of what's happening in our ethical community, these are doctors that wrote this. Okay, so when you start framing it and understanding it in that context, this whole debate starts looking different, don't it? And so he was accused of that, but I don't know that that was fair. It may not have. Trump is not the most eloquent all the time when he says something. He doesn't always explain it very well. But is he right that babies are being aborted after they're born? If there was such a thing. You can't be aborted after you're born, technically. But that's the same language, by the way, they used in this medical ethics paper. Why? Because if abortion's already popular, then using that same term to kill an infant, it's easier to make that connection than to start calling it infanticide all of a sudden. Because people are going to cringe at infanticide because we haven't been numb to that one yet. We've been numb to the abortion language. Right? Okay, y'all quiet tonight. All right, next one. He claimed that global warming are saying that oceans will rise 1/8 of an inch in 355 years. All right, let me see if I can pull this up without too many commercials. It's not going to play for me. That's what I was afraid of. Okay, so maybe I can clip some of this stuff later or something, but he's talking on a podcast. And the guy he's talking to, he says, these foolish people, they say that the oceans are going to rise 1/8 of an inch in 355 years or something like that. So that sounds like sarcasm to me. Now, I know that some people in the media aren't very good at sarcasm. They don't really get it. That's why they attack the Babylon Bee. That's why they get them banned from Facebook. You know, Babylon Bee is a satire site. It's supposed to be funny, but it keeps getting fact-checked. How many of you know that satire, by its very nature, is not true? But in this case, again, not trying to defend Donald Trump every single time. It's just, Any one of us might have used some kind of analogy like that. We do it all the time. And that he was in a very relaxed environment. He wasn't giving a speech. He wasn't debating. He was just talking to this guy. He said, yeah, he said these guys. And actually, you miss what he's talking about beforehand, because what he's talking about is the dangerous threat of nuclear weapons around the world, and people seem to be more concerned about carbon output than they are about these nuclear weapons. And so we miss the whole point of what he was saying, because they're nitpicking on whether or not how much the oceans are going to rise and what length of time. Okay? To me, it's nitpicky, and it seems like, and I'm saying this after I've done this research, I felt a little bit before, but now it's like, it just irritated me, because they nitpick at everything he says. I thank God I don't have some. I've had some people before in my congregation that have sat there and taken notes on everything that they thought I said wrong. That is miserable. You know how hard it is to preach to somebody that's going to nitpick on everything you say? So Terry, stop, please. I'm just kidding. She don't do that. I'm kidding. She don't do that at all. But it is. It's very hard. You know, you feel like you're like this, and that's just the thing. Okay, so his policies created the strongest economy in U.S. history. Okay. Again, back to the same stuff I said before. He exaggerates. Okay, or he's hyperbolic, or he likes to lie big, whatever you want to call it. The truth is that compared GDP and job creation was similar to some other administrations. He also said that he left a no inflation economy. Now, this one I'm going to take exception to, as I have before. When he left office, the inflation rate was 1.4%. Now, obviously, that's not zero, which is what you generally think of as nothing. But wait a minute. That's a nuanced answer, because the Federal Reserve believes that 2% inflation is optimal, because you want some inflation in order to keep growth occurring. So if you look at it from the Federal Reserve's own standard, then 1.4% is basically no inflation. At least no bad inflation. So take it the way you want. Was it zero? No, it was not. Was it the greatest economy in U.S. history? No, it wasn't. But I think most politicians do that kind of stuff. All right, claimed tax cuts were the largest in U.S. history and primarily benefited low-income people. Okay, number one, largest tax increases in history. How many of you know that was not true? Okay, it was the fourth largest tax cut in history. And as far as the primarily benefited low-income people, Pointer, the people I researched here, they say that it disproportionately benefited high-income households, which is the same thing that Kamala Harris has said, which is the same thing that Tim Walz has said. However, I'm going to show you an article from The Hill that uses IRS data to disavow that, and actually says that no, that it actually benefited low-income and middle class more than it did the wealthy. And I'll show you those numbers in a minute. Okay, claims his immigration policy significantly reduced illegal border crossings and crime rates, and he claimed that there were 20 million illegals come in under Biden. Now, if you've noticed, J.D. Vance uses the term 10 million, but Trump in the past has used 20 million. I haven't heard him lately, so I don't know what he's been saying. According to the statistics, first of all, to tell you that during the Obama administration, 1,000 a day was where they considered that we were into crisis mode. If 1,000 a day came in. At the end of Trump, when he left office, there were more illegals being deported than there was coming in. So we actually had a net negative flow of illegals when Trump left office. Under Biden, almost immediately, we had 6,000 per day. So 6 times Obama's crisis level. And so, according to the statistics, 10.1 million, it says mission, it should have been million, million encounters, and 1.5 million got away. So that's 11.6 million. Donald Trump said 20 million. Again, he exaggerated although we don't really know. Some people have estimated that the number of people that are in the country that we don't even know about is much, much higher than that. I think those are the numbers that Donald Trump may be using, or maybe he's just exaggerating again. I don't know. But either way, neither one of those things diminishes the fact that it is a serious issue. And progressives and conservatives will agree on that point, for the most part, with exceptions that I can't get into.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I can right here.
Yeah, please.
It's on the, we're talking about the illegal border crossing. The border wall.
Yes.
The wall. I know I saw something on the news the other night where, Trump got at a certain part and then it stopped. And they showed the steel rafters or whatever just laying there.
Right.
Rusting, where they had to stop it. So was that stopped? Can you explain that a little bit in short about?
Yeah, the very first day that Biden took office, he reversed all of, or almost all of, I think it was all, of his border, of Trump's border policies.
Okay.
So the stay in Mexico policy went away, the wall building went away, all that went away. Last I heard, a lot of the materials that had been purchased for the wall that's been setting has been auctioned off at pennies on the dollar. So even if he gets back in office and starts rebuilding the wall again, we got to buy the materials again.
Okay. What I saw did show, it was on 60 Minutes or something, showing, maybe it was just one part that there was a whole bunch still there. Though.
Right.
But they, probably not all of them. I'm sure they sold some.
Yeah, I don't know what the status of getting,
Right.
but that's what they were doing. They were pushing to get rid of it all. Because at that point, they didn't want anybody coming back and building the wall because they've been against it.
Right.
Until recently when Kamala decided that she was for it after saying that he was a joke because he said he was going to build it in the first place.
They're completing some of it, right? Didn't I see that in one report?
I don't know. Are they?
Yeah.
I can't keep up with it.
What is the percentage of the wall that has been completed?
I don't know. I heard that number last night. I don't think I think they're probably rating it if they were to cover the whole southern border, but it was never a goal to have the whole southern border covered. Because there's a lot of natural land places that just it doesn't even make sense to put a fence there because it's too treacherous. So I'm guessing that's probably what they were doing. They were probably using their numbers their way. But I don't know that for sure. I don't have exact numbers on that. What's that? Well, that's what Wall said. I believe that of what we need to build, it's higher than that. But yeah. So, okay. Anything else on this?
Well, you got to also remember too, Pat, when Donald Trump was in office, he also had a divided Congress and a divided Senate most of the time.
Right.
So they were stopping a lot of the things he said he was going to do.
Well, I'll go further than that.
They never let that go into play. They always say, well, you said this, but you didn't do this. But they never say,
Right.
because Congress and Senate.
And actually, he did do most of his campaign, or at least tried really hard to do most of his campaign. He was one of the first presidents I've ever seen do that,
He did.
which I was surprised because you guys know that back in the day, I was very much against Trump. I did not want him to be president. I liked Ted Cruz during the primaries, but he proved to me that he was serious about what he was talking about. I didn't trust him because he had supported abortion in the past. He had paid off Democrats in the past. I mean, he'd done all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't trust that this guy's a true conservative. But when he got in office, he governed like a true conservative and did a lot of things that I greatly appreciate. I'm glad he did, including with Israel. Lord, we could use him now in Israel. So yeah, but he did, but I'll add one more thing to that. For the first 2 years, he was fighting his own party.
Right. Absolutely.
And the entrenchment of the political class is still a very serious problem in this country. I'm just going to say it clear. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you're Republican. The powerful Republicans are problems. The powerful Democrats are problems. Because they've been in Washington too long. They are entrenched. And then the bureaucracies that exist underneath of them and the power players and the money that goes on has just absolutely just about... You don't want to talk about a threat to democracy. That's the threat to democracy. How can the people's voice be heard when Ben Franklin's so far represented?
Yeah.
Get what I mean? Okay. Kamala wants to ban red meat to stop climate change. Okay. No evidence that she ever said such a thing. However, will note that often a part of the climate agenda is to get rid of red meat. So perhaps he conflated them, perhaps he just felt like lying that day, whatever. But okay, we'll count that as a lie because she did not say that. But you can see how it kind of fits the narrative. Okay. Harris is responsible for his legal issues. Okay, no evidence of that. Harris wants a military draft. No evidence of that. So he's told his little fibs. Okay, he's definitely said some things, or maybe he believed them. You know, who knows? That's why I say be careful with the lies part here. That's what I ended up using, but it's not always lies. Sometimes it's something else. It's confusion. It's whatever with both candidates. He indicated that schools are performing transgender surgeries without parental consent. Okay, or more specifically, that schools are allowing, helping it, facilitating it. There's no known situations of this. However, in Washington State, 13 to 17-year-olds can access certain gender-affirming care without parental consent through their insurance. Oregon, 15 to 17-year-olds can access it, and in California, minors who are in foster care can do it. So we're not necessarily talking about surgeries yet, although there's some people that would like that. But gender-affirming care, as far as the hormones and things like that, there is a lot of that going on. So perhaps he was misinformed. Perhaps he was concerned that it was going to happen. I can't say. But it's hard to count it as a full lie because there's a lot more going on in that area than we would like to believe. So I'm glad he's bringing attention to it. I just wish he'd get his facts straight. Exactly. All right. California, under certain conditions, courts may take responsibility for minors and then give them approval to have the care. And if we don't put a stop to this, it's going to get worse. It absolutely will. Harris didn't talk about being black until running for president. All of y'all have heard this one by now, right? Obviously, she went to a historically black college. She was raised at least partially in a black community, or it was probably more of a mixed community, but I'm going by what their evidence was. It was a stupid comment. He should have never made it, but he did. Moving on. Claims she was the first to drop out of the 2020 primaries because she was so unpopular. She was actually 14th to drop out of 29 people that were running for the primary that year. So she was about midway in the pack. She did, however, drop out before the very first actual primaries. She dropped out after the first debate. Although she actually took control in the first debate. She had a lot more energy back then than what she's showing now. Of course, now she's not talking a whole lot. This is my favorite one. You ready for this one? This is Donald Trump. If Jesus came down and was the vote counter, I would win California. Yeah. Well, the last time a Republican won California was 1988. It was George W. Bush. Previously, just for your information, they voted for Reagan, Ford, Nixon, Eisenhower, Hoover, Coolidge, Harding, Taft, Teddy Roosevelt, McKinley, Harrison, Blaine, Garfield, Hayes, Grant, Lincoln, Buchanan, and Pierce, all the way back to the founding of California. So there was actually 25 Republicans that Democrats have voted for and 18 Democrats in their history. Now, but they haven't voted Republican since 1988. Anybody want to venture a guess why?
Because of the Cold War with Russia.
Nope. Nope. See, they still voted for Bush afterwards. Gentrification.
What?
Gentrification. Asians and Latinos became the massive portion of the population in California. And they tend to vote Democrat. So why might the Democrats want more immigrants. Just saying. It worked in California. Now, there was another thing that tied to that, which is sort of like you said, except it was the end of the Cold War. The end of the.
You were saying, why did they vote for George W. Bush?
Oh no! Why did they stop vote? Why did they stop voting Republican and start voting Democrat? Yeah, the reason was because of gentrification. The other thing that tied to that was that after the Cold War, the defense industry scaled back. When the defense, and there was a lot of defense industry in California, and most of those were conservative voters, and they moved out of California in order to find jobs. So that only increased the percentage of the population toward Democrats even more. You may not like those answers, but that's sociology. And that's coming from that's not coming from Pastor Rodney, that's coming from very liberal sources that are quoting those statistics. They have a plan. They really do. Now the question is, how much longer are Latinos going to continue to vote for Democrats if they keep pulling some of the stuff they are? We'll see. Claimed to receive the Man of the... this is one of my favorites too. He claimed to receive the Man of the Year award in Michigan. And the press has gone all over the place to disprove this. They have searched high and low, and I think trying to find his Man of the Year award, they found John Gotti on the way. See, now I know who's old enough to know who John Gotti was because nobody else laughed. Very appropriate joke, I think, considering the longshoremen strike right now. But anyway, y'all can look that up on Google later. For you youngins in the crowd who don't know who John Gotti is. He was played by John Travolta, if you're curious, in the movie. But anyhow, but I know they, for whatever reason, I didn't even know of this one, but I'm like, the news media has gone crazy over him saying he got this Man of the Year award and that he obviously lied about it. And I'm like, why is this so important? And then my other question is, why would Donald Trump lie about getting a Man of the Year award? I'm sure he's got a whole wall full of awards that people have given him over the years. For The Apprentice, for his buildings, for his everything he's done. And he was Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2016. So why does everybody care about him being some organization in Michigan's Man of the Year? I have no idea, but it's a big one. So if you want to solve the mystery of the year, find out if there really is a Man of the Year award for Donald Trump. But as far as the news media is concerned, that's a lie. So just so you know. All right. Everybody good on Donald Trump's lies? Any questions? Okay, so we can't say that he doesn't lie sometimes, right? Or he doesn't misspeak or whatever. He exaggerates. Whatever. He's not always a friend of the truth. Can we say that? All right, let's go to Kamala. All right, now, I had thought when I started this, well, I'll do some J.D. Vance and I'll do some Tim Walz too, and I just don't have time for it all. There's just too much stuff out there. So here we go. Kamala, let's look at her. All right. Harris campaign social media account has repeatedly deceived with misleading edits and captions, according to this CNN report, believe it or not. Now, most of CNN's reports were about Donald Trump's lies, but occasionally you'll find one about Kamala's lies. So this one comes from here. You can see the citation there. All right. One is that Donald Trump was lost and confused. So on X, they suggested, that Trump was lost and confused and showed an edited clip of a speech he gave in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. He said, would that be okay, North Carolina? I don't think so, right? You may have seen this in some of the commercials. Well, what they don't show you is that earlier in that clip, he had pointed to a portion of the crowd that had come up from North Carolina, and he thanked them for being there. So at this part of the speech, he points at him and says, is that okay, North Carolina? They clipped that out. They said he was in Pennsylvania. He didn't know where he was. See how crazy he is. See how that works?
Yep.
Deception's easy if you know how. Yep. All right. He's forgetful. Trump forget which state he's in. Notice this. Again. Now they're going to double up on what they just said. Extended footage shows that Trump was relating a story about a small town in Pennsylvania that had experienced a 2,000% increase in the population of Haitian immigrants under Harris. But he was in, and I must not have wrote that down. He was in, was it Arizona at the time? I don't remember. But he was somewhere, he was in a different state. He was talking about Pennsylvania, so they used that to say, oh, see, he forgot what state he was in again. Now, why was he talking? I think this was his thinking. You also notice that Donald Trump doesn't always think the way we think. He's not always on the same track we are. Has anybody else noticed that, or is it just me?
Yeah, he's not.
Maybe he's just super genius and some of us have trouble, or maybe he's just, whatever. But he was in Arizona, which is a border state, which has a lot of immigration problems. So he was talking about immigration, and he used this analogy from Pennsylvania. And some people are like, well, why would you be talking about Pennsylvania and Arizona? Well, the reason he did is because of this. Even Pennsylvania, which is not a border state, is now, other states other than the border states are actually having immigration issues now. All right. Charlottesville, and we heard this in the debate. Remember that? She brought this up in the debate. But also on her X account, she said, Trump says nothing was done wrong in Charlottesville in 2017 when neo-Nazis changed Jews will not replace us, Jews will not replace us, and killed an innocent woman. But the full video, this goes back 7 years. This was debunked 7 years ago. In the video, Trump makes it very clear that he is not talking about the he actually says that. I am not talking about the neo-Nazis. He said they're bad. When he said there are good people on both sides, and that may be another slide, I'm not sure. But when he said there are good people on both sides, he was talking about the two sides of the statue debate. The ones that wanted to keep the statues and the ones that wanted to get rid of the statues. And probably most of us in this room and probably most of us online know people that were on either side of that debate. Do we think they're terrible people because they're not on the side we're on? Some people do, but hopefully not. Hopefully we just recognize that I can see some points, and I can see some points. I can sit down and look at both sides. And back then, I remember I made the statement, who cares about a stupid statue? But there is more to it than that. And I was kind of flip, and I shouldn't have gone that easily, because my point was, as Christians, we shouldn't be focusing on statues, and I still believe that. We should be focusing on other things. But there is a truth, too, that when you allow your history to be stolen out from under you, it harms everybody. So you want to move them to a museum, you want to do something else, but don't destroy them, don't tear them up, don't do all that. And to frame everybody by today's moral context for what they were then, we're not going to fare well in 100 years either. So we need to stop doing that. But at any rate, she brought that up. Okay, in September 18th, they posted a clip of J.D. Vance being asked if he would consider privatizing veterans' health care. In the video, Vance said, I think I'd consider it. Okay? And that's what the caption reads as they show the caption below him speaking. However, what he actually said was, I think I'd consider and so what he actually says is and, but they wrote it, making it sound like it was definitive. However, if you look at the extended clip, he says, I think I'd consider, where is it? I think I'd consider giving veterans more choice. Why force a veteran to drive 2.5 hours to a VA facility when he can get cheaper and good care right in his own backyard? Big difference. They were trying to accuse him of saying that he would get rid of the VA. And that's not what he was saying at all. But that's the way they presented it. This is one of my favorites because it's everywhere. Every commercial, every whatever. Project 2025. She frequently makes charges against Project 2025 as a dangerous Trump plan to take over America and destroy democracy and freedom. Project 2025 was not Trump's plan, is not Trump's plan, has never been read by Trump if he's telling the truth. It was written by the Heritage Foundation, The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank that has been around forever. I don't remember when they started, but even Ronald Reagan took some of their advice. He didn't take it all. He took some of their advice, and he used it when he was in office. Truthfully, if we were to read 2025 tonight, we would probably agree with about 80 to 90% of it in there. It has to do with dismantling government bureaucracies that are controlling our lives. It has to do with, now they talk about it making him a dictator. It does not make him a dictator, but what it does do is it does put the power of the executive branch under the president, which is where it should be. What has happened since the Wilson administration is more and more of the government is now self-autonomous. And so you get a president in there, and they can't do anything with the State Department because everybody's so entrenched there. And they have trouble even fighting them. When George W. Bush entered office, Pat Robertson had put together several people through the Regent University Law School who they recommended for cabinet positions and positions of power. And when he got done, he went back to Bush and he said, "Hey, you didn't use a single one of our people." And he said that Bush looked at him and said, "All that was decided before I got there." That's the reality. So what Heritage Foundation had done, and it was some of Trump's people, he worked on in the past that were a part of that plan, but what they did was they put together this 900-page book, almost 900 pages, that goes through abortion, that goes through bureaucracy, that goes through all of these different things. I have not read it all yet. I just know parts of it. And that's why I say we would probably agree with it. I haven't read it enough to know how much I'd agree, but I'm usually in tune with a lot of things that Heritage does. But the point is that was never Donald Trump's plan, but they have been knocking him with it every chance they get. And even though he said it multiple times, I've had nothing to do with it. I have not read it. They keep repeating it over and over and over and over again. Every stinking time I turn on YouTube, I'm going to see an ad that says, Donald Trump's Project 2025. He's taking over the world. He's a threat to democracy. He's going to destroy everything! And then when crazy people decide to shoot him, they're like, we didn't have anything to do with that. This level of visceral hatred is not helpful. It's not helpful at all. And it's amazing to me, as I've gone and I've looked at this stuff and studied this stuff, Donald Trump is constantly being attacked for being hateful to people. And last time he was. This time he really hadn't been saying much at all. He's been very light. He's been like Trump light this time as far as attacking people. They told him not to do it, so he hadn't been doing it. Well, and I think the assassination attempt affected him some. Yeah. But on the other side, that's not true. They are saying nasty, nasty things about him every chance they... And it's not just that he's ugly or he's a bad person or whatever. He's a threat to democracy. He's going to become a dictator. He's Hitler. The worst things you can think of to say to a person, that's what's coming from the other side, and not one complaint from the media about any of that. Not one. You've got people in Congress that are saying, you see Republicans in a restaurant, get in their face. Tell them you don't want them there. Kick them out. You got senators standing in front of the Supreme Court building with one of the Supreme Court justices threatened with assassination, and they're like, you've unleashed the whirlwind. We're coming after you. Really? No. Anybody that buys into this, that the conservatives are the ones that are hateful, they have not been paying attention to the world. Now, there are some hateful conservatives out there. We don't claim them. And we're certainly not white nationals, and we're not white nationalist Christians, whatever that is. We're none of those things, although we get treated that way. All right, moving on. So let me just say it again. Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025, even the parts that we might wish he was. He would certainly be a lot stronger on abortion if he was going with Project 2025. I don't like his stand on abortion. Most people I know don't like his stand on abortion. We believe he's taking the easy way out, but he truly believes that that conservatives cannot win if they take a hard stand on abortion right now. Why? Because they've been getting their butts kicked in every state where there's been a vote, pretty much. Now, why is that? Because conservatives and Christians are lazy. And I can't remember who said it, but they were absolutely right. He said, when Roe versus Wade was overturned in the Hobbs decision, the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, they went to work with every amount of energy they had to get it back. Republicans were too busy celebrating they had defeated Roe to do anything. I don't believe that if people know the fact, they would support the killing of the unborn. But we're not doing a very good job of convincing them. And we've got to get better at it if we truly believe that every life is precious. If we don't, then we can answer to God for it. Because that's where we are. Moving on. August 30th, she put out a video of Trump saying, I pulled out an old law from 1907 because we don't pass laws like that. They are tough with the text. With the text, Trump says he plans to bring back laws from 100 plus years ago, echoing Project 2025. There it is again. And with the caption, we don't pass laws like that, they are tough. But if you watch the extended video, he was actually talking about the BLM riots and how he used a 1907 law to go after the ones who were damaging property. But again, sound bites better than the truth. Tax cuts for the rich. And you kind of got that point on that one. I'm going to just skip down. Well, maybe not. Let's see. Their ex-post said Trump tells his wealthy donors he's going to make tax cut handouts for the ultra-wealthy permanent and cut their taxes even more. And the clip actually says, the fifth pillar of my plan is to make Trump tax cuts permanent. They are massive tax cuts, biggest ever permanent. Does that sound familiar? Biggest ever permanent, and to cut taxes even more. But if you look at the full video, he was talking about eliminating taxes on tips and eliminating taxes on Social Security benefits. Harris' campaign defended the misleading post by saying there were wealthy donors in the crowd and that he plans to lower corporate tax from 21 to 15% for companies. We haven't even got into the tax implications of all this stuff, but moving on. Anti-union, they said that Vance, Democrats want to attack Republicans as being anti-union and sometimes the shoe fits. But in his extended clip, he says, but not me and not Donald Trump. He then went on to talk about the things they've done to support firefighters. So again, just clipping it down to where it sounds the way they want it to. Talking about him seizing power, there was a guy by the name of Jack, I can't say his last name, but anyway, who's written some books and things, but he was on Trump's team, and he said, if you have principles without power, it's meaningless. We must will power, we must seize power. And they used that against him. But his full quote said, now, if you have all the power and no principle, you're a tyrant. But if you have principles without power, it's meaningless. It's completely meaningless. You must will power. You must seize power. Big difference in those two statements. And for those of you who wonder about that, let me just ask you, how many of you can run a successful business if you don't utilize power? How many of you can run a family if you don't utilize your power? Have you seen somebody that's tried to have a family and they try not to have any power over their kids? How does that family work out? It's an absolute disaster is what it is. Power needs to be used in a righteous way. And that's all this guy was saying, but obviously they turned that on him. She says she's a middle-class kid, but in reality her father was a Stanford University professor. Her mother was a biomedical scientist at UC Berkeley. If I hear that I was a middle-class kid one more time, I'm just going to puke.
She had a summer job at McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, well. I didn't even put that one down. But I still don't know which McDonald's it was and can't find a McDonald's that We can't find her application to McDonald's any more than we can find the Man of the Year award for Trump. I just want to say. The Trump tax cuts mostly benefiting the wealthy. The Hill did a report, and they used IRS data, and it showed that the people who made $15,000 to $50,000 had a 16 to 26% reduction in their taxes. Between 50 and 100K, 15 to 17% reduction. 100 to 500K, 11 to 13% reduction. And those who made $500,000 a year or more, only a 9% reduction. So you tell me, who got the best benefit? Proportionately, the lowest income earners got the most money, which is exactly what Trump has been saying, which says that when they said that he was lying about it, it wasn't him that was lying. This sales tax, y'all have seen the commercials on this one probably. What she's actually talking about is tariffs. I've never heard a tariff called a sales tax before, but it is in this case. So he's talked about using tariffs, especially against China, because of the great trade imbalance, which, by the way, in 2023 was $279 billion to the Chinese favor. And so what he's talking about doing is, and he did use tariffs in the last administration to affect change, to affect trade, to affect whatever in our favor. And that's what he's doing. She's saying that it's going to cost Americans, and there probably will be some, it probably will inflate goods a little bit, especially the stuff that's coming from China, but it will make it more competitive with American goods, which will balance out what we're trying to do, especially in trying to build more businesses and things here in the United States. Have we wore you out yet? A few more to go. January 6, 2021, riot at the Capitol, worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Wow, that's interesting.
Okay, I have a question about that.
Okay.
I do know what happened at the riot, but I mean, what was ever decided? Was Trump behind that, or who was behind that? 100%. Do we know that? The riot?
No, we don't know. I mean, there's been hearings, there's been whatever, but it's a big cabal of mess right now. I think there were different groups that were involved, so it's hard to say. There didn't appear to be any real organization from a crowd perspective. There may be from small group perspectives, but from a crowd perspective, Trump did not tell them to go into the building. As a matter of fact, if you go look at the transcript, he said, "I know that you'll go over there peacefully and patriotically," is the words that he used. He did say, "Fight like heck." But what he was talking about is fighting like heck for our democracy, fighting like heck for our freedom. Everybody uses that kind of language. He wasn't telling them to literally take up arms. And the interesting thing is that when they went in, they didn't take up arms. As one guy said, if it was an insurrection, it was the worst insurrection in history because they had no weapons. Every insurrection in history has weapons. If you're really trying to take over the government, you're going to have a weapon. Right? Were they stupid? Yeah. Did people get hurt? Yes. Is it terrible? Yes. Does it rise to the level that they're trying to place it? That's tough to sell. Were there some people that got out of hand? Yes. And some of them were police officers. The only people that died were protesters, except for the one police officer who died later, and the autopsy showed that it was not from the riot. Of course, that part of the report they waited to release quietly, like they do. And of course, now one of the biggest things that's happened in the last 2 weeks now, I think it's been, is that they actually found documentation for what they've been claiming all along, and that is that Trump told them to have, literally, flat out told them, have security. Use the military, use active military, use off-duty military, I don't care, but make sure the Capitol's safe. That is documented. And that went to the Pentagon, and somebody at the Pentagon decided, we don't want to do that because Trump made us try to use them the wrong way. So they violated a direct order from their commander-in-chief, and that could have stopped all of this. And we know that now. How many of you heard that reported in the mainstream news?
Nope.
One. Which channel? Do you know?
It was actually a copy
A copy on YouTube, okay. So it wasn't MSNBC or CNN. Of course not. Because that doesn't sell what they want to sell. And that's the problem I've had with all this deception and the lying and the whatever. When you let me ask this. The election is, if the polls are correct, if we're right, it's pretty much neck and neck. Right? Either one of them could win. Right now, as it stands. Would there be any difference if MSNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, Hollywood, if all of those, and Google and Facebook, if all of those guys were neutral, what might be different? It's actually, to me, it's tremendously amazing that a conservative candidate can be running neck and neck when every single power player in the country almost, with maybe the exception of Elon Musk, and he's not exactly conservative, but he's at least more balanced, is against him. And everything you're hearing in every movie you watch, and almost every, except for maybe Reagan, if you went to see that, almost everything that's out there tells you he's a liar, tells you not to believe him, tells you he's a tyrant, tells you he's a dictator. What would it be like if it's, hey, we want to talk about equity? They like to talk about equity all the time. What if this were an equitable race? What if both were being treated the same way? What if Kamala Harris had been fact-checked? And the argument that Dana Bash gave when she was defending ABC for deciding to do that was she said, well, they could have went either way. They could have went the traditional way of being unbiased, but they just knew that he just lied so much that they just had to make sure that they got it out there. So they're going in with the assumption that everything he says is a lie, and then they set the narrative. What would it look like different if they were all just fair? Yeah.
I hate to be asking all the questions, because I've learned a lot.
Well,
With
please.
you, I appreciate it. Why do they hate him so bad? I mean, I know they don't want him to win, but I mean, and I know there's a lot
You need
involved
to
in
read
that.
Jonathan Cahn's new book.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Why do I say that? Because what the question you just asked is perfect, because it really does. 'Cause he addresses that in the Dragon Prophecy, but he's talking about Israel. And if we look at Israel right now, why is almost every nation of the earth angry with this little strip of land and its people? Yeah, about the size of New Jersey. Why do they hate them so much? Why did the UN just tell them to get out of their own land? Or to get out of the occupied territories, which, by the way, they wouldn't be in if they hadn't been attacked. They took them over for security reasons. The West Bank, they're not even in Gaza right now. Well, they're in Gaza now because they had to be, but they weren't in Gaza before the attack. Lebanon, where the Hezbollah is fighting from, or was fighting from, until they have pretty much decimated them up there now, that was supposed to be protected by the UN. The UN was not supposed to allow any weapons to be there, and the UN's blaming Israel because people were there firing missiles at Israel from the place that they were supposed to be protecting. But then you've got to look at who's on the Security Council in the UN. It's the Palestinians. Which genius, and you can go back in history and find this, but which genius decided that Russia and China, two totalitarian, we talk about worrying about totalitarian state here in America, two totalitarian states should be allowed on the Security Council of the United Nations? It's like, we're going to have a world of peace, and we're going to start by putting people on our council that are intent on world domination. Sounds like a plan to me. Too bad Hitler's dead. We could have added him to the list. It's crazy. It's nuts. But back to your question more directly. Why do they hate Israel?
I mean, why they hate Trump so bad? That was my question.
Well, no, but I want to come back.
you want me to-
I'm going this direction. Why do they hate Israel so bad?
Because Israel wants Trump.
And the question goes back to our study in Revelation. Why did the dragon go after the woman and the child? This is a hatred that goes all the way back to the creation of man. And Israel has been abused and mistreated and killed and martyred and everything else ever since the beginning of history. And here's the tie-in that you need to hear. People don't understand this. Even though it's hard for us to look around and think of ourselves as a Christian nation anymore. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
But what you don't understand is the Middle East still believes we are. Because they cannot relate to this idea of a secular, atheistic political system. They can only imagine a political system that is based around their God. That's what Islam is. It is both a political system and a religious system. And you cannot separate. That's one of the things people don't understand about Islam, is you cannot separate the political from the religious with them. We try to do it all the time, separation of church and state. We go too far, I think, in my personal opinion. But we do it as a nation. They can't. That's why Sharia law. That's why as soon as they start getting enough population in a city like Dearborn, Michigan, what do? They start implementing as much of Sharia law as they can because it's a part of their code. So they still see us as Christian. Even the people that don't act like Christians, they still think, well, they're Christians. They're all, because they don't know what we believe. They just believe we're all worshipers of Christ. So that's why they hate us. The liberals hate pretty much for the same reason, although they don't have the same religious code. But from an atheistic standpoint, they think that religion, many of these guys, especially some of the founders of these movements, were people that were hurt by churches, that were hurt by religion, were hurt by whatever. And so they truly believe, and just listen to them, and you'll hear this given to students all the time in our school systems. They will say that religion is the cause of all the death and the heartache and the wars all throughout history. And when they say religion, they don't mean any religion. They mean Christianity. And they start talking about the Crusades, and they start talking about the Inquisitions, and they start talking about the Salem witch trials, which, by the way, Salem witch trials had nothing to do with, well, it did have to do with religion, but not with true Christianity. The Inquisitions were a total mess of a political system, and the Crusades were a total mess of a political church, the Roman Catholic Church. And we could get into that later if y'all want to, but the reality of it is more people died under atheistic regimes in the 20th century than ever died under Christian wars. And they don't want to acknowledge that because those were what is Russia and what is China? They're atheistic systems. Okay? So why do they hate us so much? Trump supports the things largely that Christians support, and they hate that. Now, it goes deeper than that because there's a lot of philosophy and everything that goes into that, all the way back to the French Revolution and the American Revolution and the differences between the two, which we talked about on that one Wednesday night. But the bottom line is we have two, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it's one thing that I want to get to at some point, and that is that this vote is not, I'm sorry, I know people said it, I've said it for years in the past, not recently, but in the past, I don't vote for the party, I vote for the person. That's baloney, okay? What we're talking about is two fundamentally different world views.
Right.
What we're talking about, it doesn't matter how pretty Kamala Harris may be, doesn't matter whether she's black or Asian or white or whatever she is, doesn't matter if Donald Trump's a bully. What matters is, what are their worldviews and how will that be carried out in their administration? That's the bottom line. And if Christians don't start realizing that we've got to vote God's values rather than looking at people, the Bible warns clearly against graven images. As a matter of fact, it warns against all images. And America is guilty of following after images. Hollywood stars, political figures, even criminals Dancing with the Stars put a criminal on this season. I don't watch Dancing with the Stars, but my wife was telling me all about it because her mother told her all about it. And so we had to look up this. Yeah, it's that lady that impersonated being a rich person. And so she was on Dancing with the Stars apparently with her little low jack thing on. She did get kicked off the first time they got a chance to, which was good. But even the fact that you would put somebody like that up there and people would be celebrating them for breaking the law. We're messed up.
Yeah, we are.
We're messed up bad. All right, give me just a few more minutes. I know we're running late, but this is important. If you need to go, that's fine, but let me finish this up. All right, 9th-month abortions don't exist. Okay, that's what Kamala Harris said during the debate. CDC shows that there are thousands of abortions after 21 weeks, which is after 6 months. So it may not be 9 months, although we do know of ones that have occurred at 9 months. And more importantly, it's not so much that they have or haven't occurred, it's the fact that they support them.
Right.
That it's okay up until the time of birth. Right? Can I understand how somebody I don't believe in abortion at any point, but if they're 4 weeks pregnant, can I see how they might think that that's not a real life? I can at least understand where they might be coming from. I disagree with them, but I can understand. I do not understand any person that thinks a 9-month-old baby in the womb is not a baby. I'm sorry, I just don't get it. Maybe I'm naive, but that don't make sense to me. So 21 weeks, which is over 6 months, and I want to show you some pretty pictures. At least I think they're pretty pictures. What did I do with my slides here? I'm all messed up. Okay, there we go. Ain't it pretty? Where is it? Where did it go? Oh, there we go. All right. So that's 21 weeks. That's what we're talking about. 21 weeks. Notice the eyebrows, the ears, the fingers, the toes. That's 21 weeks. Does that look like a clump of tissue to you?
No.
And I just think this is one of the coolest pictures I've ever seen. So if it grosses you out, forgive me. I do remember there were some people, probably like Jason in the birthing class in high school that passed out. But that just, to me, it just speaks of protection. Trust. That's 21 weeks. So is it a choice or is it a baby? Murderers make a choice too. Sorry to be so bold. I know we have to have compassion for the women. I'm not saying we don't. I think most of them are just deceived, and they need to see the truth. But we've got to be better at showing it. So, but I think the church seems to be getting more and more afraid of entering the debate. It's like we're ashamed of what we believe. Am I wrong?
Well, the church don't want to offend anybody. That's crazy.
But yet the cross is an offense to those who are perishing.
That's right.
Some people need to be offended so they can find the truth. Most of us are offended when God disciplines us, when He shows us we're wrong. Thank God for offense. All right, the border bill that Trump opposed would have solved the problem. Okay, y'all have all heard that one. It still would have allowed 1.8 million migrants per year before triggering a shutdown at the administration's discretion. So it'd be up to them. As one person said, it would have enshrined the existing policy into law. So basically what they've been doing for the past 3.5 years, it would have just given them the legal reason to do it, the legal justification to do it. The initial bill contained $60 billion for aid to the Ukraine and $2.3 billion in assistance to refugees. She don't talk about that part, does she? And it would have given legal status to the Afghan nationals that they brought back from Afghanistan. SCOTUS immunity ruling. Trump would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. He could be dictator. He'd finally get all the power that he wants because the Supreme Court just made this horrible, horrible decision. Everybody heard that one, right? The truth is, Supreme Court changed nothing. And Supreme Court actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, at least presumptive immunity for official acts. I spelled official wrong there, sorry. There is no immunity. I told you I was in a hurry when I was trying to get all this down. There is no immunity for unofficial. There is no, what? No immunity for what? No immunity for unofficial acts. They said it right there in the Supreme Court decision that there's no immunity for unofficial acts. So this idea that he can walk out on the street and kill anybody he wants to because he has immunity is a lie. And I don't know if I can pull this up, but if I can, I want you to see this. Because it is the best thing I have seen on this topic. Come on, play for me, baby.
Concept of presidential
Big volume.
immunity is somehow unprecedented, is somehow remarkable. That claim is utterly ahistorical and disconnected from the entire Constitution.
Everybody just wrapped up once again the biggest interview of my entire life with
Try that again.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The nub of the Democrats' argument today is that the concept of presidential immunity is somehow unprecedented, is somehow remarkable. That claim is utterly ahistorical and disconnected from the entire constitutional history of the Republic. Gentlemen, Mukasey, before 2023, how many times has the President of the United States been indicted?
None.
Before 2023, how many times has the former President of the United States been indicted?
None.
In the last 2 years, how many times has President Donald J. Trump been indicted?
4 times.
Now, many presidents of both parties have engaged in controversial actions, and yet none of them have been indicted. Let me ask you, General Mukasey, if a private citizen were to erect an internment camp and to forcibly kidnap American citizens, to single them out because of race, and to imprison them based on their race, would that private citizen be subject to criminal prosecution?
Would.
When President Franklin Delano Roosevelt did the exact same thing and erected Japanese internment camps, was FDR prosecuted?
He was not.
Let me ask you, similarly, if a private citizen were, say, to detonate a nuclear weapon over a city and kill over 140,000 people, and then if that private citizen a few days later detonated another nuclear bomb over another city and killed 75,000 people, could that private citizen be criminally prosecuted? Was President Harry Truman prosecuted for detonating nuclear weapons over Hiroshima and Nagasaki? All right, how about this? If a private citizen launched a weaponized drone and killed a United States citizen Could that private citizen be criminally prosecuted?
He would.
Was President Barack Obama criminally prosecuted when he killed United States citizens using drones without notice and without due process?
He was not. Although as far as due process is concerned, I believe the comment of my successor to that question was that Anwar al-Awlaki got, quote, all the process that was necessary.
Well, although I suspect he might disagree with that assessment were he able to present his case.
Right.
All right. Let's contrast that with the rules that govern other federal officials. You were a judge for 19 years. As a federal judge, did you have immunity from your official acts?
For my official act, yes.
Do federal prosecutors have immunity from their official acts?
They do.
Now, the distinction between official acts and personal acts is not a terribly shocking distinction. Under the decision of Trump versus United States, if any president walks onto the sidewalk and just shoots a citizen, is that president liable to be prosecuted?
He is.
How about this? If the president steals funds from his campaign, does that president face criminal liability?
He does.
How about this? If a president sexually assaults, let's say, an intern in the Oval Office, is the president subject to criminal prosecution for that?
He could be.
So that distinction, again, is not a shocking distinction. The Founding Fathers vested the executive power in a single president of the United States. What we have seen in the last 2 years is we have seen Democrats deliberately weaponizing the Department of Justice and our legal system to target their political opposition. It is not an accident that every indictment against President Trump was brought by a Democrat and was brought after he announced his campaign for President of the United States. Understand the target of those indictments was not ultimately President Trump, it was the voters. It was prosecutors who were terrified that the voters would choose to re-elect President Trump. One of the great things about the United States is we're not a banana republic. Since 2000, the nation of Pakistan has had 6 former prime ministers prosecuted and convicted. Brazil has had 3 former presidents arrested and imprisoned. Last year, Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega arrested, charged, and imprisoned 40 political opponents. General Mukasey, you were Attorney General of the United States. Is it the proper role of the Department of Justice to prosecute and target the political opponents of whoever happens to be President of the United States?
It is most assuredly not.
Thank you.
That's probably one of the most compelling arguments I've heard on this topic. Absolutely powerful. That's why I like Ted. He has argued before the Supreme Court before he became senator. All right, so we'll save some more stuff for later, but before we quit, comments, questions, thoughts?
You won't see that everywhere, would you?
Mm-mm.
Could we have access to the clip that talks about Trump actually ordering or asking?
I can try to locate it. I didn't clip that one myself, but it's just something I've seen in the last couple of weeks. Can you drop me a note, please? See if I can locate that for you. I know that Steve Baker's the one that I heard release it. I think he was the first to release it on the news. He's the reporter that took footage of January 6th and then was arrested for being there.
And on a little side note on that, Pastor, I read an article the other day, it was talking about the people being prosecuted for the January 6th. Out of the 243 or however many has been prosecuted, none of them have been charged with insurrection.
Right, that's true. And some of the charges are very questionable.
Some of them are like staying on federal property entering a building, a federal building
Right.
without permission. So a lot of the people that are charged or have even big convictions are not on insurrection. Nobody has been charged for
Right.
insurrection.
Yeah.
They cannot make that stick. So even the fact that they call it that is another lie.
Mm-hmm.
It was not an insurrection.
Yeah, the biggest charge that I've heard of that was being charged with most of them was interrupting an official proceeding, and that one last I saw, I haven't followed it through, but last I saw, even that was falling to pieces. That the courts were like, what?
Yep.
So yeah, they're getting creative with their charges, but the courts aren't always agreeing with them. We're seeing the same thing in the New York case with Trump. I don't know if you've been following that, but it's in front of the appeals court this week. And the justices have been asking questions like, what precedent do you have for this? And Letitia James has responded and said, well, this case and this case, said in all of those cases, there were injured parties. You have no injured party. Nobody's been hurt by any of this. And so it's interesting the way, if this goes the way it looks like it's going to go, Letitia's getting ready to lose her case big time. So we'll see what happens there. And again, not defending Trump. If he's guilty, he needs to pay. But some of this stuff's just absolutely nuts. All right, comments, thoughts, questions? Anything you want to make sure we cover next week? You know there's too much to cover before the election, right? So I'm trying to pick and choose at this point.
Yeah, because early voting starts October 17th.
Yeah.
in Jackson County, so.
Early voting starts the 17th. Mail-in voting's already started, but we're having some trouble, especially in western North Carolina, because we've got 14 precincts that were taken out.
Well, they also showed on news for what?
Over 2,000 duplicate ballots were sent out.
Got 2 ballots.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll go
So
through.
they're going by the honor system, just turn them back in and don't vote twice.
Oh, and I did do a little research on the voter ID question. That's the biggest mess I think I've ever seen in my life.
It's a big mess.
So basically, here's the deal. If you don't have an ID, or you say you don't have an ID, or you don't happen to have your ID with you at the time when you're voting, you can sign a paper that says, I don't have my ID because, and check the box. You can decide what the reason is why you don't have your ID. If you do mail-in voting, you can also sign one of these pieces of papers that basically says, well, I don't have an ID because I don't have a birth certificate, or whatever. You can basically come up with any kind of imaginable excuse you want, send it in, and that will suffice for your ballot. It will be treated as a provisional ballot, but we know as close as elections have been, provisional ballots play now.
I actually have a situation, you know where everybody is reminded to check on your status
Right.
for your ability to vote? And I did that, and in the process, I'm thinking that I may have accidentally registered a second time. And if I could accidentally do that, then what's to stop people from doing that all the time?
Yeah.
And another thing, all of these people that are going to be listed as those that are departed from us because of the storm, who's to say if
That their
You know
ballots
what I'm fixing
that their
to
ballots weren't already sent in?
yeah, it's
So to speak. Ray Stevens' song, Grandpa Voted Democrat.
it's a mess.
It is. I realize I got a little bit more partisan tonight than I normally do. Although you notice I wasn't really talking about republicanism, I was talking about conservatism. And there is a difference. There are many Republicans that aren't worth our vote. And every once in a while, you can find a Democrat that's worthy of it, but not very often. On the local level, yes, maybe. But the problem is, once you get into Congress, everything's controlled by those parties. So, we can talk more about that later. Maybe, if we have time. All right, anything else? Jason, what's on your mind?
Just trying to, hoping that people would actually see stuff like this. But with social media, people see stuff and they just go with what they see.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Nobody studies, nobody researches anymore.
Yeah.
Or they're uninformed, it's like today I was mentioning the debate, and one of my coworkers said, there was a debate last night?
Wow.
How did they do? And I said, it was the vice presidential candidate. And I mentioned one by name, and they said, oh, is he for us? And I was like, we're literally 10 days away from early voting, and you don't have a clue who the candidates are?
Right.
You don't know who the vice presidential candidate is? I mean, everybody should know that by now.
Yeah.
And this is not their first time voting. So that's what's scary.
Right.
People are uninformed.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And they don't pay attention.
And that's why I wanted to do this for you guys, so that you could have some firepower, I guess, as you go out there to talk to people. We really haven't gotten into we do need to get into the worldview side, because I want to show you the biblical approach to some of these topics and what these topics are, the policies. So that's my plan for next week. I'll try to finish up some Kamala lies, and then we'll, my hope is we'll go into some policy and look at some of their policies. Some of them, they won't really have a biblical stand. We'll just talk about what the implications are. Some of them have some very strong biblical repercussions. We want to look at those. All right, long one tonight. Everybody good? Everybody awake? Except for Judah, he's still getting used to getting up early. Actually, he's always gotten up early. Just not used to working this hard. All right. Linda E., close us out, please.
Well, we just thank you for this time that we've had together discussing about the voting process and the candidates and the policies. And Father, we just pray that you would just help us open our eyes and open our ears and help us apply it to your policies, Lord, and things that you stand for. Father, help us always be mindful of who we select, what we select, and why we select them. Let us just always hear your voice, and let us always be led by the Spirit. Help us to be the light to a world that is in darkness. And Father God, always let us be your hands and your feet. And help us come back to our next appointed time. Bless our pastor. Bless each one that is represented here tonight. Bless those that couldn't be with us due to sickness or whatever needs they have. We just praise you and give you the honor and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. FYI, we did have a little trouble with our feed on Sunday morning. It is now available on the website. So you can, if somebody's looking for it, or you hear somebody looking for it, or you're trying to go back and look at it, it's available on our website, but it's not available on social media. Okay, so that you're aware of that. Okay, have a good night.